You're too old to be playing ranchkeeper anyway. That's what one of them sneered, waving a fake HOA paper in my father's face as he stood there trembling but unbroken, 93 years old, and still refusing to bow down while an excavator engine rumbled behind them, ready to tear through his weathered fence. And in that moment, I thought maybe he'd finally give up, but he didn't. And that's when everything turned on its head because a black SUV came sliding into the dirt yard, brakes screaming, dust flying. And the man who stepped out didn't waste a single word, just slipped on black gloves, raised his phone, and froze every single one of those smug imposters where they stood. Karen, their fearless leader, went pale the second his eyes locked on hers. And right then I knew this wasn't about fences or community codes. It was about something much bigger, something we'd been hiding for 3 decades, and now it had finally come knocking. You want the whole story? Fine, let me back up a sec. That morning the sun had just started cutting through the pines when the call came, and my so-called quiet retirement cracked apart like glass. For 30 years I'd been Henry Castellano in name only, living under the alias Frank Morrison, carpenter turned recluse, watching Pine Lake from the cabin I built with my own hands. I thought I'd buried the past. Turns out the past was only waiting until I got comfortable. They came at 9:47 sharp, 5 of them in spotless polos and khakis, clipboards in hand, moving with a precision that screamed military, not HOA. Earpieces, synchronized steps, eyes that didn't blink. And Karen Mitchell, all polished smiles and empty charm, calling me Mr. Morrison with just enough hesitation to send a chill through my spine. Like she knew exactly who I was, but wanted me to know she knew. I pointed to the old property markers, told her I'd been here before the community even existed. But behind her, one of her men whispered into his mic, "Target confirmed. Proceed to phase 2." That wasn't HOA talk. That was execution talk. My barn, the one place I swore they'd never touch, became their target, and Karen had the nerve to pull a tranquilizer pistol like we were stray animals. So I hit the button, the one I swore I'd never use. The panic signal I wired into the foundation 30 years ago, connecting me to the only thread of backup I had left in this world. Arthritis slowed me, but the light blinked red, signal sent, and that's when Karen's mask slipped, just for a second, and I saw the predator under the smile. Now, Henry," she said, calling me by the name I'd buried. "Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." Engines roared down the road, black SUVs, dust clouds, and when the door opened, my heart split in two. Marcus, my son, my boy, now a SWAT officer, rolling into what he thought was a property dispute, not the unraveling of 30 years of lies. He stepped out with his weapon trained, eyes scanning, stance professional, but when Karen dropped the truth, the adopted son of Henry Castellano, I watched him stagger like I'd struck him myself. His world, his career, his faith in me, all of it wobbling under the weight of a secret I'd meant to keep until my grave. So I told him. My real name. My testimony that toppled the Torino crime family in '93. The blood, the executions I witnessed, the mob empire I helped burn down, the witness protection program that built me a new identity here. And then I told him the part that shattered us both. They weren't here for HOA violations. They were here because Vincent Torino's ghost was still breathing through his son Tony, who had spent 20 years behind bars sharpening his hate into a blade aimed right at our chests. Karen's crew dropped their suburban act and revealed their hardware, the kind of rifles you don't buy at Walmart, and the excavator's engine drowned out the sound of my pulse hammering in my ears. And then the barn exploded. A fireball devoured 30 years of evidence I'd hidden. Photos, tapes, ledgers. The insurance policy meant to finish off the Torinos once and for all. Karen didn't even blink. She smirked, like she'd just erased my last ace. Marcus called for backup, but her corrupted deputies had already locked the county down. 45 minutes till help, and we didn't have 45 seconds. That's when I dragged him to the hatch. My vault. My last secret. And when he saw the walls stacked with recordings and files, decades of surveillance proving the Torinos never really died, his face shifted from betrayal to something else. Grim resolve. "Dad," he said, "we're not running. We're fighting. And here's the twist. You're going to love this. Our sleepy Pine Lake wasn't just retirees and fishing boats. It was a powder keg. Rodriguez, the sweet old widow, she'd once run communications for a cartel. Thompson, the frail vet across the road, a former hitman with sniper skills you don't forget. The Wilson family, witnesses to a Detroit murder for hire, raising their kid with tactical drills instead of baseball practice. For years, we'd all been neighbors, waving across lawns, pretending not to know the truth, quietly preparing for the day our shadows came back. Well, that day had arrived. Tony Torino Jr. stepped out of his SUV, bigger, meaner, carrying his father's ghost like a banner. He promised vengeance, and Karen promised efficiency, but what they didn't realize was that Pine Lake had been waiting 30 years for this war. And when the first shot cracked, the facade of suburbia collapsed into open combat. Federal witnesses turned soldiers, defending not just their lives, but the fragile sanctuary we'd built. Thompson's rifle sang. Rodriguez coordinated units like she never left the cartel. The Wilson boy darted through alleys like a courier of survival. And Marcus, God, Marcus, he moved like lightning, orchestrating chaos into defense, bleeding from a shoulder wound, but refusing to go down. Karen's last card? A dead man's switch, bombs planted under our homes. But she'd underestimated us. Rodriguez had already been disarming those charges for months, one by one, every time Karen thought she was burying her insurance. When Marcus tackled her, bullets flying, the detonator clicked uselessly in her hand, and the shock on her face was the sweetest justice I'd ever seen. And then the helicopters thundered in. Real agents, real warrants, 2 years of investigation snapping shut like a steel trap. Karen's empire exposed. Tony's vengeance twisted into cooperation. And Marcus, my son, looking at me through pain and smoke and betrayal, and finally saying, "Dad, I get it now. You weren't hiding. You were waiting." 6 months later, Pine Lake wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a case study. A community of ghosts turned into a blueprint for survival. Rodriguez mentoring new witnesses, Thompson counseling veterans, the Wilsons advocating reform. Marcus working with the feds, scar on his shoulder, pride in his eyes, teaching his nephew how to fish off the same dock where I once dumped evidence into the lake. And me, an old man no longer hiding, sitting on the porch, watching the Hendersons, the newest family in protection, arrive for Sunday dinner. Marcus laughed, said we'd find a way to feed them, and his nephew cast his line like it was the most important thing in the world, and maybe it is. Because survival isn't about hiding. It's about building a place where even the hunted can stand tall, where secrets don't destroy you. They bind you to people who'll fight beside you when the storm comes. That's what Pine Lake became. A fortress, a family. Proof that even the dirtiest corruption can be broken when ordinary people refuse to break. So tell me, was it right? All the lies, the secrets, the violence we had to become just to survive? Or did we cross a line when we turned our community into a battlefield? You tell me. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because maybe justice isn't clean, maybe it's messy, maybe it's ugly, but it's still worth fighting for, you know what I mean?